Now, this is going to feel really sacrilegious after hearing Michelle sing that beautiful piece. Because I want to share this excerpt from George Carlin. He's well known for the skit that he does about football and baseball. Some of you probably heard it. And I'm not George Carlin, obviously, so give me a little leeway here and help me along a little. So here's what he had to say. He said, baseball is a 19th century pastoral game. Football is a 20th century technological struggle. Baseball is played on a diamond in a park. The baseball park. Football is played on a gridiron in a stadium, sometimes called Soldier Field or War Memorial Stadium. Baseball begins in the spring, the season of new life. Football begins in the fall when everything's dying. In football, you wear a helmet. In baseball, you wear a cap. Football is concerned with downs. What down is it? Baseball is concerned with ups. Who's up? In football, you receive a penalty. In baseball, you make an error. In football, the specialist comes in to kick. And in baseball, the specialist comes in to relieve somebody. Football has hitting, clipping, spearing, piling on, personal fouls, late hitting, and unnecessary roughness. Baseball has the sacrifice. You gotta go on YouTube and hear him do this if you have. Baseball has no time limit. We don't know when it's gonna end, might have extra innings. Football is rigidly timed. And it will end even if we've got to go to sudden death. In baseball, during the game, in the stands, there's kind of a picnic feeling. Emotions may run high or low, but there's not too much unpleasantness. In football, during the game in the stands, you can be sure that at least 27 times you're capable of taking the life of a fellow human being. And finally, the objectives of the two games are completely different. In football, the object is for the quarterback, also known as the field general, to be on target with his aerial assault, riddling the defense by hitting his receivers with deadly accuracy in spite of the blitz, even if he has to use shotgun. With short bullet passes and long bombs, he marches his troops into enemy territory, balancing this aerial assault with a sustained ground attack that punches holes in the forward wall of the enemy's defensive line. In baseball, the object is to go home. And to be safe. I hope I'll be safe at home. Football or baseball? If we were going to design or imagine a world based on one of these two sports models, football or baseball, which would it be? For you sports fans, I know the Super Bowl is coming up, so I may be stomping on tender territory with this analogy. But I do think that this is an enlightening way to imagine the kind of structure that undergirds the universe and our individual lives. And we can get a pretty good idea of how it plays out in everyday life by looking at these two sports. In theological terms, we look to creation myths to help us do this. They help us to get to the truth of our origins. Myths provide a different kind of truth than facts do. They function much the way that abstract art and dreams and poetry do. When we explore myths, we engage in a different way of knowing and experiencing the truth. Many of us are familiar with Joseph Campbell's exploration of myth and also Karen Armstrong's efforts to help us reclaim myth as an important way of knowing. Creation myths, or what are known as cosmogonies, are poetic ways to conceive of a primordial time, of the origin of things. Unlike fairy tales, which begin once upon a time, creation stories begin in the beginning. It's hard to conceive of in the beginning. Obviously, it all happened at a place and a time that we can't possibly know. It's billions of years from where we are today. Just the same, people throughout the world have always told these tales. Our human imagination and intelligence gives us a desire to contemplate origins. Humans have wondered about how the universe and Earth were formed, how humans came into existence, and how we learned to live on the planet. People want to find their place in time and space, in history, and in the cosmos. The result is more than 500 creation myths. It would seem that people in different places and different times have had a need for different kinds of creation stories. We haven't all come to the same conclusion about our beginnings. Most of us are familiar with a variety of these creation stories. We're well-versed on evolution versus creationism and its many nuances. We probably know the biblical creation narrative and some others from world religions. Maybe we've read Greek mythology. It's helpful to note that even within one religion or culture, there are often numerous versions of the same myth. There are, for example, 2 creation stories in Genesis, which are often conflated into one in the retelling. I grew up with the classic creation story that grew out of the West, and it's sometimes referred to as creatio ex nihilo, which is Latin for creation out of nothing. The monotheistic religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam fall into this category. God, the Creator, is the absolute beginning. God exists in a void. God's actions, thoughts, or intentions bring the world into being. Now, I always had trouble with this story because I could never actually conceive of nothing. I just couldn't wrap my mind around it. I still can't. I just can't imagine how something comes from nothing. Obviously, there are people who can, but I'm not one of them. Perhaps I became attracted to literary studies because of their orientation toward Greek mythology. In contrast to creation out of nothing, Greek myth is creatio ex materia, Latin for creation out of eternal matter. In this type of creation myth, the beginning is characterized by chaos and formlessness. Order arises from that primal chaos, from what is called undifferentiated matter. So light and dark, earth and sky, and other organizing principles get established. And that's found not only in Greek myth, but in other stories. And one of those stories is the Chinese Taoist story of Panku. And last week, we celebrated Lunar New Year, and I talked a bit about Taoism. And so I wanted to share this creation story with you this morning so you would get an idea of what this might be like. According to Chinese tradition, the first living thing was Panku. And Panku evolved inside a cosmic egg. Actually, that cosmic egg motif is common to a number of different traditions, and it's found in Hinduism. That's actually its earliest derivation. But the cosmic egg in this story contained all the elements of the universe. They were intermingled. And Panku grew inside the cosmic egg. And as he grew, he separated male and female, light and dark. And after about 18,000 years, the egg hatched. And Panku came out, along with yin and yang. Yang formed the sky and yin the earth. Panku died from this effort of creation, and the universe was then created from his remains. The sun and moon were created from his head, rivers and seas from his blood, wind from his breath, and thunder from his voice. Humans came from the fleas and parasites which lived on his body. Yeah, that was my reaction to it. It's a humbling start for humanity, isn't it? I happen to think we could probably use a little dose of that today. It's a good reminder to us. It was actually when I first encountered the idea of the earth as the body of God that I felt that I had finally found a creation story that I could embrace. This was after I became a Unitarian Universalist, and I was first influenced by feminist theologians. Over time, I discovered other thinkers from a variety of religious traditions who contributed to an understanding of humanity as part of something more holistic, as part of a creative, participatory universe, and I became quite attracted to eco-theologies and eco-feminist theologies, which incorporate naturalistic ideas and science-based philosophies. These creation stories are said to follow a creatio ex deo model, Latin for creation out of the being of God. In them, there is no separate creator or divine being. The universe and God are one. Some have actually argued that this is no God at all. Gaia myths fall into this category, and Lisa talked about that a bit. Pantheism and some forms of process theology also fall into this grouping. I think many of you are familiar with pantheism. Pantheism basically says the world is God. Pantheism, for that reason, has been considered a heresy by some traditional religions. And process philosophy, just at its most basic level, sees the world as part of an unfolding process, as its name suggests. And it can be understood with or without God. And I think from all of this, you begin to see how many different varieties of stories there are, and how many different ways there are to interpret them, and how many efforts there have been to merge different traditions together and to remake these different ideas. What appeals to me in the creation out of the being of God model is that nature is the centerpiece of creation. The perspective is ecological and evolutionary. The world is participatory and relational. It's open and creative. The universe is seen as in process and ever unfolding. It may sometimes seem to us that it's only traditional religion that has a creation story, or that needs one. But even skeptics and humanists have a need for a creation story. Even Unitarian Universalists. Our planet, you see, our planet has a need for a creation story. Has a need for a story that can speak to our contemporary concerns, to our contemporary problems, to our contemporary lives. We live in a world in which many people feel alienated from other people, in which many people have a lack of connection. They lack a sense of belonging. They lack a sense of rootedness. Even that deep down feeling. Wars, famine, poverty, and environmental degradation are are reminders to us that the stories we tell have consequences, and that some of the old